Hello and welcome back to my channel. I'm feeling a little bit fired up in today's video because if you have been in a spiritual slump that feels like it's lasting forever, I need you to know that there is hope. Honestly, I feel like I also have been in a spiritual slump or just more of a spiritually dry season for quite a while now. Some kind of reasons for that. So if you know my story, you know that I was single for many, many years and it was a deep desire of mine to be married and to meet the person that God had for me. I wrote an entire devotional, my Still Single devotional, speaking the truth and encouragement that I myself needed to hear in that season. So if that is you and you need to hear that truth and encouragement, I'm going to link that down below. But basically for 10 years of my life, for basically my whole 20s, there really wasn't a whole lot of change in the circumstances of my life, meaning my life kind of looked the same year after year after year, even though God was doing a lot internally. And I feel like when we're in that place of having an unmet desire, it presses us into the heart of God because we're seeking Him, we're yearning for Him to move in that area of our life, and it tends to forge an intimacy with Him in it. Psalm 34:18 says that the Lord is near to the brokenhearted, and though none of us wants to feel brokenhearted, none of us wants to be in that place of unmet desire or suffering or struggle or pain or whatever it is, oftentimes in those seasons we feel closer to God because we're desperately seeking Him and pleading with Him to move. And so that was sort of my story. Then in 2021, my husband Tyler and I got married, and while obviously in a lot of ways that was a huge cause to rejoice in God and to rejoice in His faithfulness and to thank Him and to worship Him, in another sense there was also a temptation that came along with that to turn to God less, because now I had this husband who was there, who I could talk to, who I could turn to, and there became a temptation to turn to him and to not feel as strongly my need for God. And then honestly from there, life just started happening fast. So if you compare those 10 years where there was really not much change that happened in my life to the past 3 years, and look at what all has happened in that amount of time, it is wild. Tyler and I just celebrated our 3-year wedding anniversary, and in those first 3 years of marriage, we've just experienced a lot of life. A couple months into marriage, we experienced a very early pregnancy loss, early miscarriage. The next month we got pregnant with Judah. We went through job changes and uprooted our entire lives, moved down here to San Diego, started over again with building community. We got pregnant with Savannah, bought a house, became a family of 4. It's just been a lot, and the sweetest, most beautiful season, but also just a ton of change in such a short amount of time. And there's been this massive learning curve in figuring out what it looks like to still prioritize God in a season that looks drastically different than any season I was in before and is constantly changing and is just very, very full. And so that's not to say that there hasn't been any spiritual vitality in that time, that it's not to say that it's all been spiritually dry. There's definitely been those pockets of drawing near to God, of feeling that fervor, but within that there's also been a lot of dryness as I've kind of just struggled to figure out what it looks like to really remain connected to God and to abide in Him through all of life's changes. And there's been so many moments that I've just been crying out to God, praying that He would bring me out of this season, missing the fervor I once had for Him, missing the hunger that I had for His word. And honestly, there were times of discouragement and feeling like, man, God, it just feels like this season has lasted forever. It's just dragged on and on and on. And times of feeling discouraged if I would ever feel that way again, if I would ever be kind of out of this dry season. But I'm going to share with you this text that I sent to Tyler a couple weeks ago. I basically was running a couple minutes late to Savannah's pediatrician appointment because I had been reading my Bible before we left, and I just couldn't pull myself away. I didn't want to stop reading it, and I sent that to him saying, like, look, I know it's not a good thing that I'm late, but the fact that I didn't want to stop reading my Bible is such an answer to prayer because it had been so long since I had felt that way. And so I do feel like God is slowly, finally bringing me out of that dry season into that place of experiencing fervor for Him again, hunger for His word again. And so if the dry season is where you find yourself, if that spiritual slump is where you find yourself, I want to share some encouragement with you. Before I do though, I want to tell you about my cutie little necklace. I've wanted one of these chain link necklaces for a while now. I think they're also called like the paperclip necklaces. They're super trendy, but the fact that this one is delicate, I feel like gives it more of a timeless feel also. And that is definitely my style when it comes to jewelry. I love the delicate, gold, timeless, unique pieces. And my go-to for jewelry is Ana Luisa because they are a sustainable jewelry brand. They make long-lasting pieces that are also tarnish resistant, but they're not gonna break the bank. Designs start at as low as $39. I have a handful of pieces from Ana Luisa, but this one is definitely my current fave, and they actually have some limited time deals going on right now for Black Friday, so this is the perfect time to shop for those stunning pieces if there's something that you've been eyeing for yourself or maybe as a little gift for someone. If you want to shop my favorite high quality yet also affordable jewelry, I'm going to leave a link down below in the description for you to shop. You can currently get up to 35% off, so be sure to check that out, and a huge thank you to Ana Luisa for sponsoring today's video. Now for some encouragement if you are in a spiritual slump. The first thing I want to say is don't make emotion the goal. Now, as much as I'm sitting here telling you that there is hope if you are in a spiritual slump to get out of that, I want to be careful in that not to make emotion the goal, because the goal is not to feel some spiritual high constantly. It is normal to go through ebbs and flows in our relationship with God. It is normal to go through different seasons and to be in some seasons that are sometimes drier than others. I made a whole video talking about the different spiritual seasons. I'll link it above if you want to check it out. But it's normal to have dry seasons. That doesn't necessarily mean that you are doing something wrong, and it doesn't make you a bad Christian. Every relationship goes through ebbs and flows, and God often has things He's teaching us in those dry seasons. But in the same way that it is normal to go through dry seasons in our walk with God, we also never want to settle for being spiritually asleep. For example, if you came to me and told me that you were going through a dry season in your marriage, I would encourage you and tell you that everybody goes through those seasons, that it is normal, but at the same time, I would not encourage you to be complacent in that. I would encourage you to invest in your marriage, to be intentional about finding ways to pour into it. And so I want to encourage you that emotion isn't the goal, but Jesus is. And so be faithful in your pursuit of Him and keep showing up to pursue Him day after day, moment after moment, season after season, despite the feelings, because those are going to ebb and flow. Emotion isn't the goal, but Jesus is. My second encouragement is don't stop praying. I think that sometimes we can feel pressure to get closer to God on our own, and while we certainly have a part to play, we're going to talk about that next, I think it's easy to forget that we don't have to do it on our own, that we have access to the same power that raised Jesus from the grave, and we can ask God to help stir in our spirit to bring us out of that dry season and bring us back to Him. And so my encouragement to you is to not just try to conjure it up on your own, to conjure up this fervor for God or will yourself out of this place, but remember that you have a helper who He has given you to call out to Him, to ask God to help you, to draw you near to Him. And then as you ask this of God, keep asking it of God even when there seems to be no change. I think that sometimes when we're praying for something again and again and again and we don't see any change, it's really easy to get discouraged and to want to give up. But it is so important to remain persistent in prayer, to keep knocking, to keep asking. I have a whole video talking about this as well. My third and final encouragement is don't stop fighting. I feel like part for me of why I've been in a spiritually dry season is because life is just so busy, and especially as a mama to littles, there's so little time that is truly my own. And in those pockets, it's really easy to prioritize other things over time with God. And it's not even necessarily bad things that there's a temptation to prioritize. Sometimes it's very necessary things like caring for those precious babies or working because bills got to get paid or taking care of housework or whatever. But I recently got to a point of just feeling so dry and so aware of my need for God and desperate to connect with Him that I realized I needed to actually make Jesus the number one priority in my life, to make intimacy with Jesus the number one priority in my life above all else, but not just in word, in action too. Because the truth is, if Jesus isn't my priority, if I'm not connected with Him, if I'm not abiding in Him, remaining in Him, then I'm not going to be able to do anything else in my life well as well, whether that be being a wife, being a mom, being a content creator, a friend, any of it. None of it is going to be fruitful if I'm not connected to Him. And so I kind of had this shift of saying, okay, intimacy with Jesus is going to be the measure of success in my life above everything else. And if that is truly my priority, that means that I'm going to have to be willing to let other things in my life suffer before I let that suffer. Sometimes it might be sleep that suffers, either getting up early or staying up late after both of my babies are down for the night. Sometimes it might be letting the dishes suffer or housework fall falling behind on that, or it might even be work. I have limited times that I can work in little pockets throughout the week when my mother-in-law is helping me, and it's such limited time that I feel like I gotta hit the ground running and go. But there have been times now where I'm like, okay, I haven't had time to spend time with Jesus yet, so I'm gonna take this first 10, 15, 20 minutes, whatever it is, to press into that. And if I don't get some tasks done, that has to be okay, because if those tasks get done, but I am not connected to Jesus, if I'm not remaining in Him in those things, then what good are those things anyways? And yes, I realize not everybody has the flexibility in their work where they might be able to do that, but I think the principle I'm getting at here is that God has a way of honoring and multiplying our time when we put Him first, and when we recognize that as a priority, and when we prioritize time with Him. If you don't have time to do all the things, don't let your time with Him be the thing that falls off. So don't stop fighting. And part of that is also not having the mindset and asking God to help shift your mindset from one of, how can I get in the time that I need to get in with Him today, to one of, how can I spend as much time with Him as possible? How can I just remain in Him throughout the day, be talking to Him throughout the day, finding every pocket possible, rather than just looking for those 5 minutes where you can check it off the list, saying, okay, I have a little pocket here, I want to use that to draw near to Him, having another little pocket here and just using it to press into Him, to read His word, to pray. Take every opportunity to pursue God in the little pockets of time that you do have. I talked about this in a recent video I made sharing my 5-minute Bible study routine. I've been learning that I don't always have the 30-40 minutes of undivided, undistracted, uninterrupted time, but I can still take those little pockets of time I have, and instead of choosing turning towards scrolling or turning towards something else, I can use it to turn to Him. And my biggest encouragement to you in reading the Bible, I shared this in this video, that video as well, is to write something down. I feel like for so long it was so discouraging for me to want to sit down and read my Bible, because it felt like I was just getting so distracted. I wasn't getting into it. It was hard for me to feel like I was really engaging with the text. And for me personally, at least, the biggest thing that changes my Bible reading time from being one of like, what did I just read and what did I even get out of that, to something that is really just, I'm allowing God to speak through, and I'm then pondering on it and meditating on it throughout the day, is when I write something down, even if it's just a little observation, something that stood out to me from the commentary. Because oftentimes when I take the time to slow down and write that down, there's other things that stand out to me. God speaks to me through it. I connect with Him through it. So that is my biggest encouragement to you. James 4:8 says, draw near to God and He will draw near to you. That as we seek Him, as we press in, He is going to meet us there, reveal Himself, speak to us. I think sometimes we wait to read the Bible until we have this desire to, this hunger for it. But the truth is, in order to hunger for the Bible, we have to read it. It's like eating broccoli or any other healthy food. Oftentimes, if we're not eating healthy foods, we're not going to crave it. We're not going to desire it. We're not going to want it. We have to first develop a taste for it. And if you've ever been on a journey of trying to eat healthy, you know that you probably don't really desire the healthy foods at first, but the more you start to eat those healthy foods, the more you start to enjoy those healthy foods, and eventually you start to crave those healthy foods. But here's the thing, you probably aren't gonna like it at first. You have to start by force feeding it to yourself. And I think that sometimes we have this idea of, I don't wanna force myself to read the Bible because then it's not genuine. But here's the thing, you need to. Going back to the marriage analogy, if you were to go to your pastor saying like, I just don't really feel like loving or serving my spouse, would your pastor then give you the advice of saying, well, yeah, you don't want to force it. If the feelings aren't there, you want it to be genuine, so just wait for the feelings to come? No, he would tell you to do the things that you know are good to do, even if the feelings aren't there, and then the feelings will follow. Because guess what? Something, or should I say someone, is also trying to force you not to spend time with God, and that someone, his name is Satan. Fight it, because all he wants for you is to steal, kill, and destroy your life. I also want to say that fighting for intimacy with Jesus isn't this legalistic thing. It's not like, okay, well, if I'm not reading my Bible, praying, spending time with God, if I'm not close to Him, then God's going to be mad at me. No, the reality is that connection with God is the only thing that can bring satisfaction to your soul, life to your very being. And if you don't get connection with God, you are the one who is going to suffer. And I know this because I've felt the effects of it for too long, and the effects of not being connected to God and the dryness I felt felt is what is now driving me to prioritize it at all costs. When you force feed yourself healthy food, you begin to then crave the healthy food, and simultaneously your desire for junk food begins to diminish. And kind of conversely to that, if all you ever eat is junk food, it's going to diminish your desire for real healthy food. And so my question for you, my encouragement to you is, what is the junk food in your life? What is the food that gives you a quick hit of satisfaction but keeps you from true nourishment? Is it social media? Is it scrolling? Is it turning to just watching mindless TV all the time? Is it success and that feeling of high you get when you experience a little bit of it? Ask God to reveal what junk food you've been turning to. Cut the junk food, force feed yourself healthy food, and before you know it, you'll start to crave that healthy food and you'll not want to stop eating it. I would love to hear from you down in the comments which takeaway stood out to you most. Was it don't make emotion the goal, don't stop praying, or don't stop fighting? And as a reminder, if you want to shop my favorite pieces from Ana Luisa, I'm gonna have a link down below. You can get up to 35% off. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.